suicide right now is rampant. It is all around. And if someone is giving any clues that I am exposed to, I want to be able to show the comfort that the Lord has provided for me.
2 Corinthians 1:4 says, God comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort others. When they are troubled, we will be able to give them the same comfort God has given us. Our guest on today's edition of Excellent Living knows what it's like to lose all hope and then to get hope restored. Brenda, not her real name, lost her beloved husband during COVID. He had dementia. Then she began to have her own physical, emotional, and financial challenges. Although a Christian, Brenda felt very vulnerable and chose to go down a path she never expected to take. She shared her deeply personal story with her friend and the host of this program, Cheryl Martin. Let's listen.
How did you handle his death? Because people grieve differently.
Well, it was more challenging than I would have anticipated because I couldn't touch him. I could see him through a window, but because of COVID, I could not touch him from March the 10th until September the 12th, when I got the notice that he was substantially worse. And so I was able to be with him the last 24 hours of his life. And I held his hand the whole time. So transitioning was hard, but I had already worked it out with two friends that I would go to their place to stay with them. And so I did, but then I couldn't have a service for him because the three kids couldn't come and I wasn't going to do anything without them. So it was just all more decisions that I had to make. And so it was a rough patch, but um actually I was in that what I call that numb phase, which is lovely. It just doesn't last long. And so I don't think things really hit me really hard until the spring of 22.
And you mentioned the year 22. You have shared with me that that's when you began to spiral downward. What happened? Talk about that.
Well, I had thought that the Lord had something for me to do abroad. And so I thought, well, as when we pray for rain, we want to take an umbrella along. I thought, well, I've got to get myself over there so that, I just am available if he wants to use me. Well, it turned out that it did not go as I had expected it to, and I had much more isolation. I caught COVID while I was there. And so the other thing that happened was I really realized so uh, startlingly, because of all the isolation, I think that if I didn't have anybody over there um, related or extremely close to me who would really come and support me and help me if something really severe had happened to me. And so I started being aware of my vulnerabilities. And that extended to when I came back home. And all of a sudden, I was facing new economic challenges that had not occurred. Um, they hadn't been the same way that they were. They were much more different, much worse when I got, back. The price of gas, the price of food, et cetera, et cetera. And so I never got what I call my feet on the ground. I never got my rhythm back when I came. And I started just sitting around a lot, and which increased my isolation, which increased my recognition of my vulnerability. And I started concentrating on my navel, as I call it, instead of looking outward or looking upward. I was looking inward, and it was down, down, down from there.
And at the same time, you were having some physical challenges, correct?
Oh, very definitely. So then I started not being able to sleep, and terrific sleep deprivation. And then I had a problem with my eyes. And so I couldn't drive, which has just been a lifeline for me as far as being able to get out, get to see friends, get to do things. And so all of a sudden, my home, which I had enjoyed before, just became rather stifling because I depended on friends who were very good, but to take me to places like the grocery store. Couldn't even go to the grocery store by myself. And
Did
then I had really horrible health insurance, which caused more stress and anxiety. And there was just so much coming down on me at the same time that I was overwhelmed, to put it mildly.
and I would assume not only the feeling of being overwhelmed, but also some fear.
Yes, I was afraid that I was going to outlive my money. And I was afraid um, that it was just getting so terribly lonely. And my only safe place it became my church congregation.
So, at what point did you begin to have suicidal thoughts?
Well, I have a very dear woman who's 15 years younger than I. And amazingly, she lost her husband 2 years before I did. And so at various and sundry times, we had talked about suicide. And um, she had been the more likely one who would have done it, certainly, than I. And she had access to medication that she could have done it in a minute.
Were you surprised that you were even thinking about suicide?
Maybe at times, but um, I didn't think that it would have been me. I thought it might have been this younger woman, but I didn't think that it was going to be me.
But you did get to that point, and what led you there?
What led me there was I unfortunately got to the point where um, I was I was not trusting the Lord as I had before. I kept on reading my Bible and praying, and I felt like that I was doing everything I knew to do, and it felt like, and this is so wrong, but it felt like He wasn't listening. And so again, my safe place was um, at that point in time was my church family. And so everything was going along all right. The morning that I went to church with my friends, and but something happened that embarrassed the life out of me. And what it was I had my phone on mute, and I was in church. Our wonderful minister was preaching, and all of a sudden, my phone started talking to me. You have a prescription at CVS. And people started turning around and looking at me, and I couldn't stop it. And it wasn't that my phone was on, it was through my watch. And so I was so embarrassed. And my last safe place no longer felt safe. And that sounds extreme, and it sounds even peculiar and funny and everything. But at the time, it was just the rug was pulled out from under me.
And so, what happened?
I went home and um, I had some pills. I had some extra pills because it had taken quite a while to find something that had worked for the sleeping that I needed to get. And so I just took a handful of pills, a big handful, and prepared myself that I wasn't going to wake up in the morning here. I was going to be at home safe.
Now, had you done any research as to whether or not these pills would be effective?
Uh-huh. I had that afternoon, I think. I looked up to see if they should be, and they said they should have been. But by the Lord's kindness to me, they were not.
Praise God. Did you ever wonder, because this question comes up a lot, do Christ followers, if they commit suicide? Will they open their eyes in the presence of the Lord? Was that one of your questions?
It was. And I mentioned it to my dear friends who had driven me to church that morning. And
So this was your question on the way back home that day?
mhm, that was.
Now, your friends that you asked this, was there a light bulb moment? Did they press you on that question? Were you actually reaching out in some kind of way for intervention?
They had their hands full with what they were dealing with. And so I had been reaching out for intervention at, with friends for some time before that happened. When people would say, especially at church, "How are you?" I would say, "I am spiraling down." And they would say, "Well, we're praying for you." And so, one of the many things that I have learned that I'm going to do differently, and I'm not saying anything about those people because they meant well, but what I have learned is that I'm going to listen really, really carefully to people who are in obvious discomfort or distress. And I'm going to put my arms around them, if they will let me, and say, "What can I do for you?" And I'm going to listen and try to follow through.
Mm. That is powerful, Brenda. So what you're saying is people all around us can be hurting and isolated and thinking about possibly ending their lives. And while prayer is good, we should also do something else.
That's what I'm going to be trying to do. I will tell you. Um, yes, I'm saying exactly that, and I am saying that I recognize that suicide right now is rampant. It is all around. And if someone is giving any clues that I am exposed to, I want to be able to show the comfort that the Lord has provided for me. And He provided, oh, it's hard to talk about. He provided, sorry,
That's okay.
my wonderful, wonderful husband's wonderful son. And he lives out of state, but he came and he was fantastic. And I needed those boots on the ground.
You needed boots on the ground. I
I
like
did.
that.
I did.
And talk about what that means when you say
What,
boots on the ground.
what that means to me is, and I think I've used this phrase with you before, but the power of presence. And so, because of COVID, when my darling died, I didn't have a whole lot of people around me to comfort me. And so I want to be that for them.
And how did your stepson, what did he do? First of all, from what you're saying, he flew into town.
He
He
did.
stopped what he was doing.
Yes. It wasn't convenient.
It wasn't convenient.
It was not, but he did it anyway.
Hmm.
So what he did was he treated me just like a normal person. And he didn't treat me like an oddity or like, how in the world could you? He didn't shame me. He loved me and he supported me. And he helped me with my budget and he fed me. He cooked. He listened to me. We had fun. We laughed a lot. And and he just encouraged me so much.
This is wonderful because Wasn't there a sense before this, i- in terms of your self talk and the thoughts that no one will miss you? You will just be a blip on the screen?
Yes, exactly. And uh, he made all the difference. And his sisters were so great. They could not come, but they called with love and encouragement and care. And they made all the difference. They really did. And my friends here really stepped up, and um, they just were terrific, just absolutely terrific.
Brenda, how were you discovered? Because when you took the pills and you thought you had taken enough that would do it, that would end your life, what happened next?
Well, uh, it's kind of crude to tell you this, but I vomited. And I think that that's what actually um, made the difference in terms of whether I uh, died or not. And so the next morning, um, there's a woman from my congregation with whom for some time she lives alone, and we have been texting. And if we do not hear from each other, we get on the phone. And so apparently she called, and I sounded really loopy. And so she called a mutual friend who lives relatively closer. She lives much closer than the other friend. And so she came here, and I answered the door. How I got down the stairs as loopy as I was, I do not know, but I answered the door. And so then the first friend was on her way over, and then another friend who had been concerned about me called me that morning, and I don't know whether I answered or I didn't, but she came. And then a friend all the way on the West Coast was calling. And so people had been enough people had been concerned that um, I don't think it was a surprise necessarily. I think it was, oh dear, she did it.
And so, did they take you to the hospital?
Yes, yes. One, the one friend took me to the hospital. Yes. And
And
so
how
I was
long
in
were
the
you there?
emergency room one night, and then I was in the I don't even know what you call it, but it's the mental health thing, and that was a really terrible experience. And I really encourage people, if they know they're going down, to get help before something like that happens, because it's really a bad experience. In my experience, it is a bad experience.
But you weren't expecting that experience
No,
because did you leave a suicide note?
I did. I just said I'm sorry. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. But God.
But God, yes, 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 yes. Um, so a few of the things that I learned were that um, the hard, the hard way to live is to try to go around God's plan, but His plan is always better. And trusting Him, doing anything but trusting Him completely, is a really bad idea. And many people are afraid of dealing with a situation like this, that they'll make the situation worse. But in the future, I'm going to try to get past that feeling and seek to comfort and support and help. And what I've learned most definitely this side of a suicide attempt is that God can take even something as stupid as trying to commit suicide and work it to fit into his plan for his glory and our good. Today, I have meds for sleeping. I can drive. I have a healthy schedule. I have alone time. I have time with friends. I have new health insurance. I am enjoying and trusting God like I did before this. And he's also given me new opportunities to serve him. Wow.
That is great. And haven't you also met other widows, and has he put a desire in your heart to reach out to them in a loving, sensitive way?
Yes, I feel like our congregation can do more for widows. And so I'm working on it from that end. But I also, I'll just do what I can um, on my own. And it's fun. And then he's bringing some other people into my life who could possibly, not from a mental health standpoint, but can use love and support. And so that's just really my uh, focus, is trying to relieve anybody's burden that I can, and to bring encouragement and care and the love of God and Jesus.
Your outlook is totally different now, isn't it?
Yes, thankfully.
Brenda, I want to get back to something you said about the power of presence and what you were longing for, because we can all learn from this and to be boots on the ground. Just go into more detail about, from your perspective, how we can respond if we ask someone how they're doing, and whether they answer like you did and say, I'm spiraling downward, but we sense that things are not right. How can we be more proactive? What are some practical things?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, how about a cup of tea and a chat? And then let that person do the chatting and listen really, really hard. Um, and what I'm doing with some people, when, for instance, there's a widow in my meal site group who really doesn't have access, or she doesn't know how to find a grief group. And so I've invited her to my new grief group that I'm in, that I like a lot. And so she's going to meet me at my place, and we're going to go together, so that she will not have to walk into that group by herself. And I'm trying to stay in touch with her, because she doesn't have family around. And so we're trying to do some social things, but also just get together um, on a fairly uh, often basis. Just trying to listen and see where I can fill in on some of the gaps is all I know to do.
And this is really being Christ like, but it also seems like it's about us coming out of ourselves and not just giving the pat answer as Christ followers. Well, I love you and I'll be praying for you. Everybody's busy, but you're saying it means doing something and maybe setting aside what we were planning on doing because this person needs us at that moment.
My dear, couldn't have said it better. That's
This
it.
this has been just a good lesson, I believe, for all of us, because when we hear these stories, and like you said, suicide is rampant these days, usually the response from people, I had no idea. I didn't know they were at that level of despondency, but I really wonder sometimes if there were signs that we just overlook.
In my case, there were signs. And I just have learned that I don't want to overlook any signs that I'm given.
Brenda, I thank you so much for sharing your story, a very intimate story. But God has taken this, and I'm so glad your life was spared, and now you're here to help give life, infuse life in others who are hurting. And what you have shared is an eye opener to us. Not just pray, but do more and take that next step. And as you said, um, it's Christ, I will say, with boots on.
May I remind you of what you said to me one time? is after this all happened, one of the first things she said to me, he
Okay.
said, Satan wanted to take you out,
Mhm.
but he didn't.
He didn't. Our God is faithful, and I'm so glad he didn't, because he's given you a ministry that you didn't sign up for, but you are making a difference right where you are, and God is being glorified. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear friend.
And I'm so thankful for our friendship.
And me too.
We're so thankful that Brenda spoke candidly to Cheryl Martin about her journey through the valley of grief and hopelessness, and then, by God's grace, transitioning to the other side and experiencing the love and tangible support of family and friends. Brenda is now a strong advocate for the power of presence. That means, in addition to praying, actively engaging in practical ways to help ease the burdens of those who are navigating the death of a loved one. You can hear this conversation again or download it for free when you visit our website, excellentliving.org. And while there, you can join our email list. And ladies, when you do, you'll get an invite to attend First Wednesdays. Cheryl teaches during this once-a-month online evening event that you can join by Zoom or by phone. You will be in a community of women who want to be wise and winsome. This ministry is sustained by those who believe in our mission to encourage women to do all of life God's way because it's the best way. You can donate online when you visit excellentliving.org. I'm Doris McMillan, reminding you to tune in again next week when we feature Cheryl's monthly conversation with relationship expert Dr. Johnny Parker.